If you're an active person who's looking to build muscle, strength, or endurance on a plant-based or vegan diet, eating enough protein is going to be a big part of making those goals more attainable. The goal of this video will be to help you understand exactly how much protein you should aim for depending on your goals, what plant-based foods to prioritize that are high in protein, and I'll show you how to build what I call a plant-based power meal, which will make getting enough protein on a plant-based or vegan diet so much easier. We're gonna go really deep on this one, so let's get into it. Flex your head! Welcome to another video. My name is Matt. I'm a nutrition coach and personal trainer, and I'm here to help simplify the science of nutrition and fitness so you can understand the why behind the how and make educated and informed decisions about your health. So when it comes to protein intake, the amount needed for you depends on your goals and it depends on your dietary pattern. This is why you'll see a lot of conflicting recommendations online when it comes to protein intake. It can get super confusing. So I am going to go over some protein intake suggestions for different goals, but the focus of this video is going to be the ideal protein intake for active people who are looking to build or maintain their muscle mass, increase their endurance, and recover better between these activities while sticking to a plant-based or vegan diet. So as you can see in this chart, we have different goals and different recommended amounts of protein based on those goals. However, you'll notice that regardless of your goal, if you are eating a diet that is 100% plant-based, your recommended amount of protein is actually a little bit higher than a diet that contains at least 10% of its protein from animal sources. One of the factors that comes into play when we're looking at plant-based protein recommendations is something called bioavailability. Bioavailability is a metric that measures how well the protein from a specific food can be broken down and absorbed by the body. A protein with high bioavailability is more easily absorbed and used by the body. This means your body can break down and utilize a high percentage of the protein in that food. Plant-based proteins, unfortunately, tend to be less bioavailable than animal proteins, meaning that our bodies absorb and use less of the protein that we eat from plant-based sources. That doesn't mean that they're bad or that you can't still achieve your goals while eating plant-based, but it does mean that you'll need to eat a bit more protein to get the same benefits if your diet is 100% plant-based. If your goal was to just eat enough protein in your diet to cover your bases and not be deficient, all you would aim for is 1 gram per kilogram or kilo of your body weight. If you don't know how many kilos you weigh, just take your body weight in pounds and divide it by 2.2. To use myself as an example, I weigh 175 pounds, so I'm about 79 kilos, which means I would aim for about 79 grams of protein every day if my goal was to avoid the downsides of not eating enough protein. But there's a big difference in getting enough protein to avoid deficiency and getting enough protein to thrive towards your goals. If you're somebody who is fully plant-based and looking to support that physically active lifestyle with your nutrition, you would aim to get around 1.6 to 2.4 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. To use myself as an example again, I would take 79, which is my weight in kilos, and multiply it by 1.6 and multiply it by 2.4. This would give me a protein goal in the range of 125 grams to 189 grams per day. This is a pretty big range, and I personally like to aim for the higher side. That way, if I miss by 20 to 40 grams, it's all good because I still will be well within the range of protein intake to support my goals. I'm definitely not saying that you need to hit this protein target or you won't be able to build muscle or you won't be able to recover well. That's not true. But what I am saying is that hitting this target will make building muscle and recovering well a whole lot easier for your body because that's what dietary protein helps our bodies do. My favorite approach when it comes to nutrition is to understand that food is just a tool. It's about knowing how to pick the right tool for the job. And when it comes to building muscle and recovering well, protein is the right tool for the job. Eating this amount of protein regularly means you will be consistently giving your body the materials that it needs to be able to build muscle and recover well. Now, a lot of people have the concern of eating too much protein and it having a negative effect on their health. So if these numbers seem a lot higher than what you're currently eating, you might be hesitant to try it. Well, multiple long-term studies have been done with people eating protein intakes as high as 4.4 grams per kilo with no adverse effects to the kidneys or cardiovascular health. That would be like me eating 350 grams of protein every single day. So the recommendations I'm giving you here are much lower than that and are well within the lines of safe and reasonable protein intake. So while it's great to understand how much protein you should be aiming for when it comes to your specific goals, it's a whole other challenge to know how to hit those amounts consistently, which is the part that most people struggle with. So that's what we're going to cover next. The average plant-based eater gets about 10 to 12% of their calories from protein. So if you ate the standard 2,000 calorie diet, that would equate to about 50 to 60 grams of protein a day, which isn't going to cut it if your goal is to fuel an active lifestyle as best as we can. People's protein intake on a plant-based diet tends to be lower because when people go plant-based, they just swap out their animal-based proteins for plant-based protein sources and keep everything else in the meal the same. The problem is that animal-based protein sources are usually more protein dense than the foods available to us that are plant-based, meaning that they have more protein, they cost less calories, and they're more bioavailable than our plant-based sources. So here's a quick breakdown of a food comparison. Getting 30 grams of protein from chicken breast costs about 170 calories, while getting 30 grams of protein from black beans costs almost 450 calories. Even tofu, when compared to chicken breast, is almost double the calories for the same amount of protein. So you can see the problem here, as both beans and tofu are considered high protein foods for vegans. So if you're just swapping out your meat for tofu or beans or whatever other plant-based protein you have available, you're either matching the calories but taking a hit on how much protein your meal has, or maybe you're matching the protein intake but adding in a lot of extra calories to your meal. So in order to hit a higher protein target on a plant-based diet without consuming a ton of extra calories along the way, we'll need to get a little bit of help from other ingredients in our meal. And this is where knowing what types of foods carry the most protein can go a really long way. So we tend to look at foods as if they're only one thing. We'll label foods as just a protein, just a carb, or just a fat source. The reality is that most foods that we eat are a mixture of each of these things. For instance, tofu is a solid protein source, but it's not made up of just protein. A lot of people don't know that it has just as much calories coming from fat as it does protein. The calories in beans are made up of mostly carbohydrates, but they do carry some amount of protein with them as well. The calories in peanuts are made up of mostly fat, but they have some protein in them too. So we can use this knowledge when building a meal to choose carb and fat sources that carry some extra protein along with them. So if we add these foods to your meal alongside higher protein foods like tofu and tempeh, it's going to help us maximize all parts of our meal to increase our protein much easier on a plant-based or vegan diet. So let's break down exactly how we go about building a higher protein meal step by step, or what I like to call a plant-based power meal. The first step is the most important, and that is to start your meal with a dedicated protein source. This is going to be a food that has more than 30% of its calories coming from protein. This will give you the most bang for your buck when it comes to protein in your meal. Then you're going to build the rest of your meal around it. When it comes to plant-based protein sources, some of our best options are seitan, TVP, tofu, tempeh, and edamame. I included some popular plant-based burgers as well, just to show you where some of the meat alternatives fall in relation to the more whole food sources. So you will struggle to build a high protein meal if that meal doesn't have a dedicated protein source. That's why this is step one when it comes to building a high protein meal. The second step is to add a high protein carb. These are carbohydrate foods that have at least 15% of their calories coming from protein. Lentils and beans are at the top of the list in the 20 to 30% range. Bean and lentil pastas are also great, as well as sprouted wheat breads and quinoa. While these foods don't have enough protein to be considered your dedicated protein source in a meal, choosing higher protein carbs can add a significant amount of protein to your plate when swapped out for lower protein carbs like rice, corn, or potatoes. You could even go half and half, do something like half rice, half beans, and that can make a really big difference in your protein intake. Step 3 is to add a protein-dense fat source. These are high-fat foods that contain at least 10% of their calories from protein. If you've already done the first 2 steps, you've already got a pretty high protein meal on your hands. But if you want even a little bit more, choosing higher protein fats can help you pull that off. Looking at fat sources, some of our highest protein options are hemp seeds, soy milk, nuts, and nut butters. And last but not least is step 4, which is to add in some veggies and make things flavorful. We've got our protein covered at this point. Now it's just about rounding out the meal with some veggies to get in those vitamins, minerals, and some extra fiber, and some flavor to make it taste great and just tie the whole meal together. Veggies do contain some protein as well, but are pretty low in calories most of the time, which makes it hard to get a significant amount of protein from them. But they are going to provide you with a few extra grams of protein in your meals. So I wanted to get into the kitchen and show you in real time what it looks like building a meal using these guidelines so I could show you how well it actually works. I'm starting this meal off with 4 ounces of sprouted tofu. This has 22 grams of protein in it. This is my dedicated protein source that is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for the protein in my meal. And while 22 grams of protein is great, I'm looking to get a little bit more than that in one of my meals in order to get to my daily target of around 150 grams of protein in my day. So I'm going to look to my carb sources and my fat sources to get that extra protein in. So I'm actually going to be adding 2 different high protein carbohydrate sources. I'm going to add 150 grams of steamed green lentils, which is going to give me about 15 grams of protein. I'm going to put 2 slices of this sprouted wheat bread. Each slice has 5 grams of protein, which is going to give me an additional 10 grams in the meal. Between the tofu, the lentils, and the wheat bread, this meal is already coming in at 47 grams of protein. Since I've got a bunch of protein in this meal already, I don't need to look to any higher protein fat sources if I don't want to, so I'll probably just add some vegan butter to top off the toast with. If you haven't noticed, I'm making a tofu scramble, so I am going to add some veggies, some cauliflower, zucchini, garlic, and onions, just to get in some extra fiber, get in some extra nutrients. And that is going to add a few more grams of protein. I'm going to add in some seasonings, just top it all off with some hot sauce. So there we go, finished product. Got my tofu scramble here with the wheat toast. And once I added in the veggies, this meal actually came out to 51 grams of protein with only 650 calories. Now you could obviously make this meal bigger or smaller based on your goals and preferences, but it goes to show how valuable it can be to understand what foods to prioritize to get that extra protein into your meals. And as somebody who's aiming to get around 150 to 170 grams of protein in a day, this is putting me right on target to get there, since I usually eat 3 meals a day plus a snack. So as you can see, getting more protein on a plant-based diet is definitely attainable and doesn't have to mean that you're supplementing with shakes all day long or eating ungodly amounts of tofu. You can make it happen by understanding what foods carry a little extra protein in them and prioritizing those foods more often. I'm going to put a link in the description if you'd like to download my free plant-based power meals ebook. It's going to go over a lot of the information that I shared in this video, but it's also going to include the food lists that I showed, as well as some done-for-you recipes that will get you started if your goal is to get more protein into your diet. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe to the channel. It really does help out a ton. And share this video with any of your friends or family who you think it would help. Any questions or concerns, leave them in the comments below, and I'll catch you in the next video.